All right, welcome back into another episode of the XRP podcast. Today is going to be a good one because we are going to have the legendary Brad Kimes on. You guys are going to love this one. Of course, if you're not subscribed to the show, first thing I want you to do is just hit that subscribe button right now because it is something that we're trying to build. As you guys know, we've launched a specific channel to go more long form in conversation. Everybody's been asking about that rather than just news, even though we'll cover a lot of news today. We really wanted to dive into some of the deep conversations here in the XRP ecosystem. So I want to bring in Mr. Brad Kimes. How are you, Brad?
I'm doing great, Paul. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. We're ready to move into the fall and also move into a cycle in the current crypto model that I think a lot of people have been waiting for. And that is this, rotation out of certain large assets into other assets. And that's something that people talk about and have been asking us all the time. Hey, listen, I was out on Twitter the other day and I had an interesting conversation that came up quickly. I'll share this with you. And this was Nate Garassi. And he basically, Nate Garassi, if you guys don't know who Nate Garassi is, this is the guy right here. And he is the Nova Diaz Wealth, basically a wealth manager. He's been a variety of crypto topics for many, many years. And his conversation was really around XRP being the third largest crypto asset by market cap, and then larger than BlackRock. And then his point is why are we continuing to see pushback on this token? And I came up and I said, hey, you're getting to the heart of what XRP is. And the position strategically is very, very different. And the way that I've described this, and this is something that we're doing in terms of our market sentiment index that we track sentiment data. And the way that we filter through sentiment data, primarily on X, is we take what they call the fire hose from their API. And so we take all that in, we sort it by how often particular tokens are mentioned, all that kind of stuff. And what's happening here, Brad, and I want to get your opinion, you guys can read this, and I'll explain it, is that every time we start to see certain camps start to attack the XRP camps, which is so ironic that this is so tribal in crypto in general, is that the camps that attack, whether they're bot driven or they're actually human driven, it creates a response mechanism from the XRP community, which enhances the algorithm and now has almost like a bit of an incentive structure. So every negative thread on XRP generates 10x in algorithmic engagement. So every time that we get a Bitcoiner, an ETH maxi, a Solana, it doesn't matter, you name it, one community of that, they attack XRP. We're watching this on the MSI, and it only amplifies the message of XRP. And I'm like, what are these guys not getting? Is this not something that they can figure out? First of all, why do you think the community and the project is being put back in the attack zone and vector right now?
Such a great question, Paul. My gosh. All right. So where do we start? Well, one, I can validate your algorithm that you're using because I happen to be the founder of XRP Las Vegas, the largest XRP conference in the world,
Yep.
which you were at this past year.
Great conference, by the way. If you guys have not been to this, what are you doing? You got to get there. It is so much fun.
Thank you. And you were amazing at that conference too, Paul. We really, I mean, we would love to have you every year. Just open invitation.
It's a good one.
So
it's a good one.
I can say that, it's so your information you're finding is so real, Paul, because, we as XRP Las Vegas, as a show of solidarity for 2026, wanted to have XRP Las Vegas exactly behind Bitcoin Vegas at the same facility at the Venetian as a show of solidarity to bridge this community. And you know what they did, Paul? They shut the door and blocked us from being at the facility. That's what happened. So your indicators are incredibly accurate, right? Because that is real data coming from the Bitcoin camp. And where does it come from? The only thing I can figure is fear, because they know that we're in a speculative market for a decade plus now, and everyone understands that this legislation is bringing us into a utility driven market. And
Mhm.
I think underneath of all of this is where the fear begins. But what's interesting to me, Paul, is I always see XRP community members on the defensive, protecting ourselves from the attacks. I never see the attacks start
Yeah.
from an XRP holder going towards other projects. And I find that to be very significant, because when you see those attacks happen, as your sentiment data shows, we're getting more engagement from the negative attacks that are happening on us.
Yeah.
And I happen to hold Bitcoin and a lot of other assets as well as XRP. I just find the XRP ledger extremely critical, and Ripple, the company, because I believe they're going to serve a very, very foundational role in the infrastructure of the new digital on chain economy.
Yeah, we're going to get into all of that. Interestingly enough, Gemini launched their XRP skinned credit card. And full disclosure, Gemini is a sponsor on our other channel over on Paul Barron Network. And the data that they were getting back first, when we put that up on it, the click-through rate on that credit card dwarfed every other sponsor by 3-4x. Depends on who it was. Some of our best sponsors, I think, have been around for a long time. So the performance on just that credit card for Gemini also moved them up the charts on the financial app. They actually went to like number 3 or 4, flipping all sorts of the biggest, financial apps out there. So one company chooses to just showcase the XRP community, and that's how it's rewarded. And that to me, because attention is something that I've talked about, and I think this will be a huge part of this bull run, is the projects that have the most attention on them will be the projects that end up winning in the end, because you're going to see an onslaught of new people coming into the market. And as all these other communities start to attack certain projects and it only amplifies them, I think it only creates that interest that then, of course, gets people to invest in a project. So it's a very intriguing and almost psychological study of the human nature of how people respond to things. And it's almost like, and I can't even say that XRP feels like the underdog when you look at the big assets, but I almost feel like people look at it like that. So it's an intriguing situation that we're in right now. Hey, did you see our Flare Network interview with Hugo?
I saw 2 highlights of it this morning, and actually covered one of the highlights on my channel.
Huge.
Super excited to talk about
All
that.
right. Well, hit me up on I want to get your opinion on it, because Hugo absolutely dropped some alpha on that video. It was crazy
It
what
sure
he was
was.
saying.
It sure was. Shout out to Hugo. We've been trying to get him to XRP Las Vegas since we started it. I'm telling you right now, open invitation, Hugo. We want you on stage this
There
year.
you go.
We got the legislation coming. Let's get you out there. I heard Hugo say that they're really projecting 5 billion XRP locked up by the middle of 2026.
Yeah.
Paul, I got hair standing up on my arm right now, because I tell you, I put out a tweet and I said, it was your tweet, I think, and I reshared it. And I said, 5 billion XRP being locked up is going to help create a price floor for this asset,
Yeah.
along with spot ETF approvals, which are being projected by JP Morgan to do 8 billion in the first month.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, Flare Networks, first of all, has been around for quite some time. And Hugo's analysis to me is interesting. We got into a conversation off camera that didn't even make it into the episode about the dynamic of what this really means for kind of the future of finance. And of course, what he's doing with really what I think is going to be very intriguing is the idea of a vault. And we're going to see interest-bearing yield accounts within XRP. And I think this is a big factor, because if you look at the cycles of growth in crypto, a lot of people will exit assets, and let's move outside the top maybe 10. And there's a lot of people that hold so much in assets that eventually they're going to rotate into other major assets, whether it's XRP, ETH, Bitcoin, whatever it might be, for either a bear market or a slowdown. I think they're going to move these into these interest-bearing yield vaults. And if Flare really starts to package this up with some of the other partners that they're talking about, that could be huge for the community. And also, I think in general, just investors as a whole. What do you think about the idea of a vault?
Well, I love the idea of a vault. Look, I mean, what is the problem with every DeFi platform we've seen in history's past? It is the bridge from where your assets are to where you're going. And that bridge between the DeFi platform has always been where the bad guys kind of find their way in and get assets. So I like
Yep.
the idea of a vault. And I don't mind saying, like, just going off of like Hugo's numbers, whether you're talking about 5 billion XRP being locked up in the next year or so, or these other assets that you mentioned, you're talking about the greatest unlock of idle liquidity in the digital asset space. It is not a small notion at all.
Well, and the move of what we're going to see in terms of money market
Yes.
money coming into stablecoin, including RLUSD, because it'll be a parked, asset where depending on what kind of yields are being paid, that's going to be just the new money market. We're not going to see old school money markets. Matt Hogan and I were talking about this, and he is still, and I am in agreement with this, and I talk about this on the show a lot. I do not understand why we have not seen more aggressive behavior from the banks. Now, sure, the Genius Act just got through, but surely they were not caught off guard on that.
Mm-hmm.
They had to know this was piping through DC's swamp and was eventually going to land in their doorstep and force them into the game, because I think that's the issue. Pretty soon, you're going to have a bank that you're going to have customers leave that simply says, I want to accept RLUSD. And it's a stable coin. It's a cash. It's as good as cash. Why can't I hold it there? And they're just going to start exiting. How long before we see banks start to incorporate this?
Well, I think you make a fantastic point, and the holy grail is to never sell your XRP or your assets, right?
Yep.
That is the holy grail, and have them work for us like the wealthiest 1% do with their stock positions. It is a beautiful idea, and I believe it's coming to fruition. Banks, I think, are waiting for the market infrastructure bill. I think they got to have the clarity. I mean, let's understand. I mean, banks are some of the most highly regulated entities on the earth, especially in the U.S. market. So I don't think. I mean, look, if people are into XRP and have done the work with XRP, they'll know that there's a lot more going on in the bank's back end.
Yeah.
Bank of America's, the PNCs, they've been working for years with Ripple and their suite of technology. So, and the XRP ledger. So, Standard Chartered, for instance, right? I mean, it's Citibank, right?
Yep.
There is deep connections, but I think they've been very quiet about what they're going to roll out. But they'll be ready to roll out when this legislation becomes law.
Well, and the key there will be, and people will say, even me, who, and I'm sure many of you guys watching this right now, listen, we are digital natives in most cases. We're early trend mappers, and we're also people that I would say are still crypto advanced compared to what's going to hit the market soon. So I think my question is this, Brad. You've got the market that we know, which is everybody drinking the Kool-Aid right now.
Yeah.
And then the market that we don't know. And that's a business market that I come from, because all of my colleagues are in that market that doesn't know about this right now. How big do you think that market will be? Because I'm concerned that we're going to see two things happen. One, you think about Flare and Firelight, which is the company that's going to basically do XRP lending. So you're going to be able to hold your XRP forever, put it on a loan against it, like you would any other asset, right? Most people in tech and in crypto understand that, get it today, and probably are doing it right now, especially with Bitcoin retracing a little bit. What do you think is going to happen when we actually see traditional banking, traditional business, and traditional investors finally get what is going on right now?
Well, that's a fantastic question. Well, I think you're going to see, a proliferation of mass adoption in the traditional financial world, because once the banks truly understand that they could allow you to put up your assets and do a loan and you get liquidated just by default if it doesn't work out, there's no risk to the bank. They're happy to do that for you. I think one of the things you're tying in here is the overall concept, what we talked about just a few minutes ago, is moving from a speculative market to a utility driven market. And then it really comes down to the education of the person who's going to be taking a loan against those
Mm-hmm.
assets or a
Yeah.
collateral position. Because in this current volatility, I love the idea of borrowing against my assets, but not in this current market. I want a floor price for the asset that I'm going to borrow against. I don't want to suffer 80+% drawdowns on my position if I'm leveraged against that position. That is super dangerous for me right now. I would never do that. But if we see the kind of adoption of utility and liquidity move on to, let's say, the XRP ledger,
Mm-hmm.
providing an everyday usage and a floor price that doesn't dip below, then that would tell me, okay, now this is looking like something I could put my assets up and take a lesser leverage
Right.
position with comfortably.
Well, and I think that's the point is we had our, count, I guess now it's biweekly seminar. And the seminars we host here in South Florida, and they're all business owners. And I started it just as a kind of a community PSA kind of thing for our, I won't say where, because people are asking to get into this thing, for a place that I, participate in. And the interesting point was the first time it was like 15 people. It was no big deal, and it was great. This was 18, I guess, a year and a half ago. And now it's 125 people. The room we're in, that's the max that we can have. Now we have the fire marshal there every Sunday when we do these. And it was funny too, because one of the fire marshals actually came in and listened to the seminar last week.
While
He's
I'm
like,
here,
what are you guys talking about that everybody's so jazzed up about? But anyway, the point I was getting at is XRP was brought up for the first time in 18 months as an asset.
Mhm.
And because these are people they know nothing about it. And I think that's the market that we are facing right now, is that that true adoption curve, I don't think we've seen it yet. Many people are still looking at this. I know Tom Lee, he's gone on record saying, hey, he thinks we're on a 10-year bull run. I don't know if I agree with 10-year, but if we are in a super cycle, Abs and I talked about this last week, is where do you think XRP ends up in 10 years based on just the premise of what we know today? Not what the potentials are, but what we know today. What do you think?
Well, I think it's quite good wherever we end up. And the reason I feel that way, Paul, specifically is because if you look at the internet of information that we're using to communicate with your audience today, there are many different layers of protocols that make up the experience of the current internet we have.
Yep.
TCP/IP, HTTP, SMTP, FTP, so on and so on. And all of this provides the smooth, ubiquitous experience that we're using to communicate with everybody today. Well, when the internet came out, it was adopted by governments and military first.
Yep.
Well, that's not the case here in this situation
That we know of.
that we know of, exactly. But we're about to find out, right? That's so well said. Because the truth is that this has been a grassroots movement from the bottom up. And now with the legislation passing the Genius Act into law, and now soon to be the Clarities Act, the Market Infrastructure Bill, I believe is going to have the same powerful impact that the Telecommunications Act of 1996 did to unlock the internet.com era for crypto.
Yep.
And that will be the signal that you're discussing here. That is the all clear, green light. You're going to see the financial legacy firms take
Right.
a position in this space.
Well, it's the 2000, when I left Microsoft, we had just exited the dot bomb era where there was companies layoffs in Silicon Valley were happening left and right. It was terrible. It was like carnage in the streets. 7 trillion off the market cap of the S&P based on all these stocks, and the bomb that we saw. But what happened after was kind of post flood. It was all these new companies that made it through were the ones that absolutely skyrocketed, and they're now known to us as the Mag 7.
Yep.
And all those companies originated out of, and there are many that are still in the top 50 that are still trucking along in terms of the size. And this all generates this new innovation layer that we're seeing. And I think that's what we're going to see in crypto. I think you're going to have probably 10 major projects, maybe a few more because of the flexibility and the global nature. Because that's the other thing. With Silicon Valley, it was US based and US led, where this is much more global. So it's going to have a lot of implications across other countries. So I would agree with you. I think the adoption component is, imagine this is 1999, possibly 2000, because we will see a pullback. And that is going to be an interesting time because that will test the resilience of anybody when that happens. How would you play that right now? Let's just play this out. Fred Krueger says 2026, he's a Bitcoiner, but he holds other assets. He says 2026 is going to be a boom, and we're going to see a potential pullback late 26, 27. It could be one of the biggest ever. How would you play that if that were to occur?
Wow, one of the biggest pullbacks ever.
Ever, yeah.
Wow, that would be remarkable. It's hard for me. I have trouble seeing a scenario like that because, I should be clear. Speculative assets, I think that's spot on. Assets that have utility, I don't see them taking that much of a drawdown.
So XRP, gold, Bitcoin, those kinds of assets that people are kind of referencing in terms of the comparison. And that's what, that is true because that's kind of on the boat of Tom Lee. He's kind of going in that direction too. It's interesting that we talk about Tom Lee right now because he was very early to the area of Bitcoin. Then he came over to ETH. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder if he ever comes over to XRP. He may find his way there.
It would be very interesting. You know what I'd love to hear Tom Lee really talk about is the disguised whales of Ethereum's ICO. I'd love to hear that. He never seems to want to chat about that.
No, well, now he's got skin in the game that's a little deep.
It's a little deep.
He's trying to hold 5% of ETH.
Well, God bless him. And it does look like ETH is going to have a huge position and play a huge role, at least in the early days of this adoption, utility-driven market. And I do believe that, and I believe he's got it right on that front. However, I will say I do have concerns because I've listened to builders and they've talked about the struggle and the complications of building on the ETH network even today. Yeah. And I also know that it bothers me that Vitalik Buterin way back, I think it was 2015 or around that time frame, forgive me if I got the date wrong, where he accepted money from CCP China's Wan Zhang. Those things bother me. But I mean, they don't bother everybody, but they bother me. But for me also, I'm concerned that if Ethereum doesn't conquer the complications to build on its network and the gas fees coming higher as it gets populated with activity, and I know layer twos are trying to untie that problem, but nonetheless, I'm concerned that Ethereum at some point may end up like AOL in the early days of the internet. It came out, it was strong, and everybody had AOL.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then now what everybody has is an email address. So maybe 8 years, 10 years from now, maybe it's all ERC20 tokens that are left, but no one's really using the network for other things. I don't know. It's what it looks like.
Well, and that's, I think this is the question that everybody's asking is, the cycles that are happening now, what we saw with the US government announcing 9 blockchains, that are going to be able to store GDP and data is what we're talking about here. When you saw that, Brad, first of all, XRP and Ripple were not mentioned. And Tron was mentioned. So I was like, wow, okay. We are definitely in the degens phase. It's not long before I think, Tron goes into the strategic reserve. Maybe through forfeiture and seizure. We'll see. But my point being is everybody was kind of up in arms about that and saying, wait a minute, XRP is not listed. This is terrible. What is Trump thinking? You know, all this came down. But I was kind of looking at it going, man, what a beautiful play
Yeah.
this was. Now explain, why do you think XRP was not included, at least in that group?
Look, I mean, for me, I don't know the answer, but what I'll say is the reason I can still be confident about Ripple, the company, and XRP Ledger is because of this. One, Wormhole and Python Network were highlighted as
Yep.
oracles to be used along with the 9 protocols.
Yep.
Well, Wormhole was partnered directly with Ripple and the XRP Ledger. So, again, I think the way I understand this when I look at it, and I'm not a developer, okay, so I'm not the guy to talk to about all the little factual things developer wise, but the way I look at the market and these different offerings and the 9 protocols being used, I try to remember and remind myself that the XRP ledger is a foundational infrastructure, just like TCP/IP.
Yep.
And talking about these other 9 blockchains is like talking about HTTPS being built on TCP/IP. That's how I see this. That's how I see those other chains. That's why I believe Wormhole is partnered with Ripple and the XRP ledger to provide that Oracle data, because they're really serving this multi-chain interoperability world that we're moving to.
Yeah.
And I can't say enough about this too, Paul, that you know, the reason you don't see the XRP family attacking other people to start an argument is because we understand fundamentally, even on a very basic level, that the XRP ledger is a foundational market infrastructure and
Right.
it has a decentralized exchange built into that layer 1. And it's really like a world exchange. But it's not a world exchange unless all the other protocols are plugged into it to make the market for the world. So
Bingo.
that's the
Yeah.
ultimate end goal.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing that everybody's missing is when you look at adoption curves and use cases, the guy who wins the use case, the utility, is usually the company that ends up kind of setting the terms.
Yes.
And I think that's what Brad Garlinghouse has been looking to try to do for quite some time, he and Chris, in terms of where Ripple's at least long-term strategy is. One thing to note, guys, just so you understand, if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure and do that right now. As you'll notice, we are starting to implement the way the Paul Barron podcast works, and this is a special channel that has the XRP podcast as part of it. And we focus, just like this show, on it. So these are just some of the episodes we've done. Us, we had the Kwok brothers on, Abs from, of course, the Warrior Academy came in, and then we've had Rupert on. It's been quite a good round here, and we'll continue to bring in guys like Brad Kimes as well. So you guys make sure and follow Brad out there on X, because this right here is, I still think this is one of the best X accounts out there in terms of good XRP data, and that is Digital Perspective. So,
Thank you.
Brad, I'm looking, and let me kind of bring this up for everybody. Let's bring up your Twitter account right there. Digital Perspectives. Hey, man, you're about to crack 200.
Yeah, we're getting ready to hit it, man.
Yeah, I like this. Okay, now we're talking. Let's
And by
bring
the
it
way,
on,
and
XRP.
not a penny paid for
Oh,
advertising my entire
beautiful.
8 years. It is all organic, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, that's the way to build community. It's the only way to go. I mean,
Salability, right? There's the
yeah,
word right there. If you
I
want
love it.
salability on your channel, you don't want to pay for your views.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, there's a lot of them out there that are doing that,
Yeah.
and it's unfortunate, but hey, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys held the Shark Tank style pitch. Are you going to do that again next year?
Yes. And we're going to scale it too, by the way. It's going to be massive, Paul. Massive.
What's going to be the difference? I'm looking at the tweet. This was back in June right here. But the reason I saw that is right there's the Kwok brothers, so they were leading.
Yeah.
Did they help fund that? Okay. What was the
No,
way? How did it work?
I'll tell you, look, the Kwok brothers are incredible. Shout out to Dom and Phil Kwok and Easy A and all the work they're doing going around the world, literally proliferating every blockchain that they can. I mean, they're doing yeoman's work. It's unbelievable what they're doing. Shout out to both of those gentlemen. I contacted them and said, guys, I'm interested in doing a Shark Tank style pitch for
Yeah.
developers so we can get the best ideas brought to the fore here. They loved it. They jumped in right away, and we gave away the money. We put up the money ourselves, my wife and I, this first time this year to do that. But I tell you, we're going to scale this thing, Paul, and we're gonna run it like an NCAA basketball
Tournament?
tournament
Oh,
bracket
wow.
and
Okay.
run it through that. And then the finalist will go on stage and pitch the finalists in front of top industry people, right? So that is what we're doing. And we're going to give away more money than anyone's ever given away in a hackathon in the world. That's the
Ooh, now we're talking. I have something I want to talk about to
yes,
you.
sir. Yeah, let's do
So
it.
not on this podcast,
Okay,
but off air.
I'm ready.
And we'll get it together on this because I have some ideas for you on this.
Love it.
Hey, I want to hit on one topic that you retweeted this today. Okay. And this was the Caitlin Long.
Oh boy.
Okay. I gotta bring this up, man. Sorry.
Okay.
All right. So there she is. That's Miss Caitlin Long. According to Caitlin Long, it's legalized corruption for Ripple to lobby the government. The Bitcoin lobby, however, is completely legit. Bitcoin and Ethereum proponents colluding with the government to rig a regulatory monopoly in favor of Bitcoin and ETH. That's just digital asset perspective. So when you of course, you got to push back on this because sometimes the fact that people put out like this is it's almost do they not understand the kind of double standard that's being talked about here? Why do
Well,
you think we're seeing that? This is a smart lady.
she's a very smart lady, and shout out to Digital Asset Investor, the goat in this space. I mean, he catches it, he puts it
He
out there.
does.
I'm like, he's so on top of it. I love it.
I
Well,
think he's out there just hunting. He's the best troll I know by far.
he is. There's no question. I'm telling you, he's a cut above. And, and he gets it. He gets these clips. I'm like, I don't know how he does it, but he just does it. But no, look, I'll say this. What a shame this is. Because I have been a huge supporter of Caitlin Long and
Yeah.
Custodia Bank since their fight began. And now she's turning around and taking shots at not only Ripple and XRP, but all of the community that supports them and her.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a ridiculous move here. And I guess the biggest backslap to go back to Caitlin Long is if we're paying to play and to get into this space, who was paying when we were getting sued by the SEC for 5 years and
Bingo.
for more than a decade, Paul? Bitcoin and Ethereum have been given a free pass. That's exactly the truth. And is it now that she's upset because they're still not getting that same free pass?
Yeah.
Because we've paid to be here, but it's with blood and sweat, not just
Well, I
dollars.
think this really boils down to something that's almost personal for her, and that
Yeah.
is the issue with the banking license.
And
You
you
know,
know what
because
I say, Paul? Let her come to XRP Las Vegas and sit on our stage and explain that argument to
yeah,
people because, until she started running her mouth about taking shots at us, we have been advocates and supporters of her getting the custodial banking license,
yep,
and I still am. And I want her to stop that so we can unite. See, this is the same thing I was saying when we opened this conversation that Bitcoin Vegas is taking shots and shutting us out from trying to bring that olive branch, a show of solidarity to bridge this community. The
mm,
people think that they can keep this community separate, Paul, are severely mistaken.
yeah.
Because when that market infrastructure bill goes through, we're going to see the beginning of a utility driven market and maxi this, maxi that. Everyone's going to laugh at you because they know it's a joke, right? It's like the big boys are coming.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the challenge is that maybe it is it's like a fighter in the ring
Yeah,
and they're in the 10th or the 11th round and they got nothing to lose.
that's right.
They got nothing to lose because they know the fight's about to end.
Hmm.
And there's going to be a winner and then, they understand that. So I feel like it's not that they're on the ropes, but I just feel like that's how they're fighting on their heels right now.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that instead of fighting from a position of power, which is something I say all the time. no matter what you're in. And that in reality is kind of the silly thing about all of this. But it's going to be something to watch for sure.